Welcome to Own Your Zone podcast, where we feature venture capitalists, innovators, angels, and other investors who create positive impact globally. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hi, I'm Jinan Glasgow. I'm a patent attorney and founder of Neo IP. We're an intellectual property law firm where we help clients maximize their return on investment in their patent assets. I'm also host of this show, Own Your Zone, where we feature venture capitalists, angels, and other investors and innovators who are making positive impact in the world. This episode, it's brought to you by Neo IP, where we help companies increase their valuation and protect their business through strategic planning of IP protection. We provide corporate and legal services to help companies manage risk, develop portfolios, and monetize IP assets. We believe intellectual property is a valuable business asset with exceptional potential. We help innovators create their IP assets that help them impact society for good. Learn more about us at neoipassets.com. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm thrilled to have CEO and co-founder Sassie Duggleby of Venus Aerospace today. Welcome, Sassie.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I have to say, when I first heard about Venus Aerospace, I was astonished and floored. You have already made great progress, but you have an extraordinary vision. Tell us a little bit more about your company.
Sure. So our company, our ultimate goal is to build a hypersonic space plane capable of 1 hour global travel. So you could do, San Francisco to Tokyo in an hour, or, we're here in Houston. So Houston to London in an hour.
And tell us the why. What was the motivation behind it? You have an aerospace background. Also, your husband is a co-founder and CTO. Tell us a little bit about your background. How'd you get into that? This is an amazing goal, no doubt that you will achieve. But how'd you get started?
It's been one of those stories when I look back in my life. 20 years ago, I would have never dreamed that we would be building an aerospace company. But the road has just kind of gotten us to this point. So I actually personally started my career as an engineer. I graduated from Texas A&M University with a degree in biomedical engineering. And my plan was to go to med school. And obviously, that's not what happened. It ended up as a test engineer at National Instruments, which is one of the leading kind of test companies in America. And at the same time, my husband was getting his graduate degrees in mechanical engineering. And we moved out to Virginia Tech for him to go get his PhD. And I got my MBA out there. And so I've really spent my career on the business side of high-tech companies. So I've worked for some fiber optic testing companies. Then Andrew, when he was a professor at A&M, actually spun out a company with a friend that was doing steel trailer manufacturing. So big, huge cargo trailers were hauling up and down the highways. And while he was working there, he kept telling me, come work for us. And I was actually working for a biotech spin out from Texas A&M. And I kept saying, no, you don't work with your husband. That's like business 101. And finally, just through various circumstances, decided, okay, I'll come join Andrew with this trailer manufacturing company. And when I did, we realized we work really, really well together. He's got his skill sets. I've got my skill sets. They don't overlap, but we just really enjoy each other in terms of business and personally. But so we kind of got to that company to the point where we could exit, and Andrew had the opportunity to go out and work for Virgin Orbit, which is, Richard Branson's small satellite launch company where we were launching rockets from the wing of an airplane. And I actually decided to stay at home at that point. We moved to Southern California. He had a great job. Our girls were 3 and 6 at the time. And I thought, you know what, they're only little once. I'm going to stay at home. It was probably the hardest years of my life because at my core, I love to work. I love building things. But it was a really sweet time.
And being a mom is priceless, right?
It is. Yeah. It's the most important thing that I do in my life.
Yeah.
And way more important than, building companies. But while we were living in Southern California, Andrew's also in the Navy Reserves. He joined, I always joked it was his midlife crisis. So at 32, he just decided to join the Navy. Hopefully that's not his midlife, but later in life decided to join. And in the Navy, he's an engineering duty officer, which they do ship repair. So 2019 or 2018, excuse me, was a really bad year for the Navy. There were a bunch of collisions out at sea. And there were some ships that they couldn't get back to the US. They could only get to the Japanese shipyard. And so the Japan shipyard, the Navy called them up and said, is there any chance you could come to Japan? And so we actually talked about it as a family and decided, you know what, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So, give Virgin Orbit credit. They allowed him to put his career on hold, and we deployed to Japan. And it was actually living in Yokosuka. And we were sitting out one day, kind of looking over the entire Pacific fleet. It's in our apartment. And, we were talking about the fact that we had traveled internationally, but we had never lived overseas. And it was the first time we intimately understand, like, the world is a really big place. And so, we were actually discussing trying to get home for my grandmother's birthday. Okay, it's 13 hours. We've got 2 young kids. She's going to be, I think, 93 or 94. And like, was this even possible? And so he was like, I've been watching this rocket engine as he was both a professor and then at Virgin Orbit. And he's like, there's this new rocket engine that's kind of coming down the pipelines. And he's like, if it's ever proven, I think we could be home in an hour. And I kind of laughed at him. I was like, yeah, right. And he's like, no, like, it's the most, if it works, it's the world's most efficient rocket engine. You could actually, if you know anything about rockets, they're usually about 90% fuel. Is like, this one would be a propellant and oxidizer. And so this one would only need about 65%, which means you could have wings and landing gear and all these things that finally make a space plane possible.
Yeah.
And so we just started dreaming on it and actually came up with the name Venus Aerospace, living over in Japan. And it was twofold. One is talking about just aerospace is one of the worst industries for females and diversity. Okay. And so Venus being the goddess she's the only female planet. In terms, like, if you look at it's Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, they're all male Roman gods, and Venus is the only Roman goddess. And then she's also the goddess of love. So it was kind of talking about what would it look like to build a different type of aerospace company where we actually love our employees well, we want them whole and healthy. And so that was 2018. That was this crazy idea in the back of our mind. We got back to Southern California. I actually joined Virgin Orbit also, and that's where I really learned aerospace. And Andrew's the space nerd. I was always laughed at him watching Star Trek, and ended up joining a company and kind of fell in love with the industry and rockets, and just worked with really, really incredible people. And then 2019, a professor at Purdue University proved this engine academically. He showed that it does get 15% more thrust than a standard rocket engine. And so we kind of looked around and said, all right, we feel like we need to go commercialize this engine. It truly changes the world. And so we got Virgin Orbit all the way to launch. We kind of just we had the idea in the back of our mind, but just held on to it, and then got Virgin Orbit to launch, and then put in our resignation and started Venus. It was the middle of COVID. It's a perfect time to start a company, 2 kids stuck at home.
I love it. I love it. And you're right. Women in aerospace, it's not very common. This is an extraordinary company. You're leading it as CEO. Can you share any experience? Are you connecting with other women in the industry?
Yeah.
What's your point of view on that?
Well, so when I was at Virgin Orbit, I was 38 and I was the oldest female engineer there. It was just this, what is wrong with the industry? There's a bunch of 25-year-old female engineers. There's a few young 30s. And then by the time you're 40 and got none. And so I had lots of theories on why, and what happens in the industry that, when you get to kind of childbearing ages, you just say, I can't put in these 100-hour work weeks. I can't do this.
Yeah.
And so, so starting Venus, it's fascinating as we're fundraising and talking to people. I actually constantly would get introduced to hey, do you know so-and-so? They're leading an aerospace company, or they're fundraising, and so I actually started a group. We call ourselves the Badass Women of Aerospace. And it's about 8 women that are all founders. They're all seed Series A founders of aerospace companies. And we actually have a monthly call and just talk about fundraising and culture. And one of them had to fire their first person and was like, hey, I've never done this before. Anybody have tips? And so we talk through the legal implications and hey, what can you say? What can you not say? And it's been a really, really great resource for me of just other women that most of them are moms, spouses, kind of going through the same things with us as we build companies, and then also still try to.
What a powerful group, and peer mentoring, right? I mean, you learn from each other, and it happens everywhere, but it's a different point of view, I think, as a woman. And all seed Series A. Like, it'll be great to watch you guys over the years. I know I'll confess to being a space junkie. My undergraduate research in engineering was at the NC State NASA Mars Mission Research Center. We were doing 3D carbon fiber composites for the Mars rover, right? Ultimately, Perseverance made it. I think that was 30 plus years. You have a much more aggressive timeline than that. Speak to when we think we can have this 1 or 2 hour flight. We can go to Japan and be home for dinner.
Yeah. So, in terms of full scale commercial flight, we're saying no sooner than 2030. But, we hope to be flying, Mach 5 hypersonic drones here in the next year.
Okay.
And some of it is because technology has really changed in the industry. You can now 3D print rocket engines. The development cycle for aerospace, one of the reasons engines haven't changed over time is it's like almost a year to do kind of the nickel cladding to get a full scale rocket engine built. So if your development cycle is a year to learn, did this change allow for something else to happen, then you can't iterate as an industry. But really 3D printing, kind of DLMS, metal printing has allowed us to really iterate quickly. And as such, it allows us to have faster design cycles. So we can print something, test it, learn, oh, this didn't work. And then, can continue doing that much, much faster.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, time and evolving how we design and build and prototype is great. You've had some success already. You just mentioned with the Mach 5 drones. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so we have not flown Mach 5 yet. We've flown kind of subsonic, smaller drones. One of the challenges as you're trying to optimize for hypersonic flight is, a hypersonic vehicle is really good at going fast. It's sleek, but can it take off? Can it land? What happens if there's a crosswind? And so we've kind of started there. And then, so we're flying drones, and then we're kind of dual development pathing. We've got our rotating detonation rocket engine, which is, again, the world's most efficient engine. And we're building that. We're here at Spaceport Houston, which has been we actually moved from Southern California to Houston. And it's awesome because we literally are testing rocket engines right outside our hangar door at Ellington. So, so we're building the rocket and building the drone. And then at some point, probably in the next 2 years, we'll then integrate the two of them together to have it as a, ultimately Mach 7. And then, the future goal is a Mach 9 passenger transport vehicle.
Wow, that's amazing. I can't wait for that. Sign me up. I'll be one of your early passengers on that. Talk a little bit more about your culture inside the company, because I remember that your motto was like home for dinner.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your inside the company culture.
Yeah. So we have been very intentional with how we're building Venus from a cultural standpoint. And so, the company vision is home for dinner. We want to be able to fly you across the globe and have you home for dinner. And if you work for us, we want you home for dinner. And I think a lot of that stems because we are a husband and wife team with 2 younger kids. And so if we're on a 10-year journey to get this, space plane into the commercial world. And if we push 100-hour work weeks and ignore our kids, by the time we're done with this, like, they're out of the house. Like, we only have a small little window. Yeah. So trying just to be very intentional about like who we are and how we operate as a company. And so we've outlined, we call it the Venus flight plan, and it's kind of who we are and how we operate. So it's things like, we chart a new course. Like, there's no roadmap to how to build a space plane. If there was, it would have been done a long time ago. And so we want innovative people that are okay solving hard problems and that they're rested. Like, there's so much research that shows that if you're well rested, if you sleep well, if you take vacations, that you actually are far more productive. People want to think like, oh, I'm just going to dig in with 100-hour work weeks and just elbow through this. Well, you don't make smart decisions. And ultimately that leads to, dumb work or rework or silly work. And it's like, no, we want you healthy and whole so that you can rest and make wise, good choices for the company. And ultimately believe we'll get to our milestones faster. And what's been fascinating the past 2 years is it's working. Like, we get folks out of SpaceX or folks out of other parts of the industry, and they come in, and I feel like they actually have some PTSD. It's like, no, what do you mean you don't want me to work on this weekend? What do you mean you don't want me, you want me to truly be home for dinner? And it's like, no, go home and come back tomorrow and give us your all while you're here. But then we want you to enjoy this ride. And if we want to hire the very best, we want them to come on this journey with us, and we want them to stick with us to see it all the way through.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like there's a different way to operate.
Yeah, it seems like that's a great way to have commitment back from your team. You're committed to them, their health, their well-being, their total person, not just their work output, the work output that you get from that.
We all bring other stuff to us with work, right? It's not like you come to work and you're this isolated, siloed person and there's all these things going outside. And so it's like, how do we make you as value you as a person, and that recognizing that you're a caregiver, you've got all these other responsibilities, and we want to support you in that.
Yeah. And I think certainly we learned a lot through the pandemic of caring about our team and being flexible helps ensure we can make it through that. We can make it through anything. And you certainly have aggressive goals here. And I love that you're attracting people and giving them a better life at the same time that they're giving you creativity. We find in working with clients who innovate and who are creative that, you do have to be on your A game to come up with ideas that have never existed before, right? I mean, God gives us the unlimited resource of ideas, and yet you have to take action on that and work on a team and integrate them. It's not an easy thing to do, but it sounds like you're doing it well. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thanks.
So you're fundraising.
We are fundraising, yeah.
How's that going? What are you finding in the current economy? This is being recorded in February 2023. How's
the market has drastically changed from when we kind of raised our seed round, which was in January of 2021. And then we raised an A that was preemptively led by the group that did our Series Seed. And so we kind of got spoiled. It was like, hey, you guys are crushing it here, keep building. And since then, the market conditions have drastically changed. And so it's been really interesting as we go out and tell the story. Kind of there's two stories that Venus can tell. One is our ultimate vision of this 1 hour global transport. How does the world change if you can get anywhere in an hour? We truly believe that leads to peace and prosperity. And there's all sorts of data that shows anytime you connect the world with faster transport, you actually do cause economic growth. And so there's the ultimate goal of where we're going, but that's costly. It's a long timeline. And so sometimes you get standard VC funds that are on 7-year time horizons, and maybe they're a couple years into their fund. And, so they look at a 10-year timeline and think, oh, that's too long, that's too risky. And so trying to walk that tight line of this ultimate goal that is, the market estimations are up to $270 billion per year for high-speed global travel. And so it's an incredible pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we're chasing, but how do we get near-term revenue? How do we get product market fit a little faster? And so that's where, hypersonics is one of the top priorities for the Department of Defense. Here it is February 2020. So the Ukraine conflict is going on, and Russia has used hypersonic weapons during that conflict. Mm-hmm. And not too long ago, it was announced that China had a hypersonic test that was successful. And so there's a lot going on in the global ecosystem in terms of conflict with hypersonics. But at the end of the day, Venus's ultimate goal is that, 1 hour global travel. And so it's an interesting time to fundraise, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So in the intermediate time, you are working with the drones. So you can transport things, if not people yet. Do you see those as milestones that will make some commercial impact?
Oh, absolutely. Kind of the hyperlogistics market, possibly the military market. High-speed reusable drones is there's a need for that. Yeah. But what's interesting is lock down, especially government funding type things. It's a 5-year budget cycle. It's an entirely different game than kind of the VC market. And so, we're navigating both paths, but still kind of keeping our eye on that end goal, which is the, human transport market.
Love it. Love it. I know that you're going to be speaking at our Eclipse IP Futures Conference on October 16th, 2023. We're looking forward to that and to the milestones that you'll have then. But for now, how can our audience reach out to you or learn more about Venus Aerospace? Where can they find you?
So our website is, venusaero.com. I think we're also on LinkedIn and, kind of all the standard social media channels. And so, feel free to reach out there.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you, Sassie, from Venus Aerospace on our Own Your Zone podcast. You certainly own your space, and we're looking forward to updates from you in the future. Thanks for being on, Sassie.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Own Your Zone podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.